is his decisions that he feels are now out of his control and may actually be out of his seem to have been tailored or handpicked specifically for him. And so the purpose of this talk is to get us to understand a little bit about our own predisposition, our own instinct, and why sometimes we do the things that we do. Why do we keep falling into the same sin over and over and over? Why do certain things make us angry and they might not make other people angry? So this is a quote by Saint Isaac the Syrian, where he says, "Blessed is the man who knows his own weakness, because this knowledge becomes to him the foundation, root, and beginning of all goodness. For whenever a man learns and truly perceives his own weakness, at that moment he contracts his soul on every side from the laxity that dims knowledge, and he treasures up watchfulness in himself. But no one can perceive his own infirmity if he is not allowed to be tempted a little, either by things that oppress his body or his soul. For then, comparing his own weakness with God's help, he will straightway understand the greatness of the latter." I read the whole quote because I do think it's very important and relevant. There are two things to take. The first, he says, "What blessed is the man who knows his own weakness." We're all born with our own predispositions. We've all experienced things growing up. And these things have developed habits in us, weaknesses. They've shaped our personality. He says, "Blessed is the man who knows his own weakness." And he tells you how a person comes to learn his weakness. When he's tempted, he falls repeatedly. The devil presents us with temptations. He watches us. The devil is like the best psychologist ever. He knows your own weaknesses. He knows your vulnerabilities. And he knows how to use them. And so he watches your vulnerabilities. And then he pokes at them. And he says, the next thing he says, what watchfulness? Now that you know your weakness, and we all have them, you should be watchful. You should be aware. What might be good and okay for your brother might trigger you, might not be good for you. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be part of the power of any. You might have a friend that's okay with doing certain things and it doesn't impact them. But for you, because you know yourself, you know that this can lead you down a dark path. And so knowing who you are and knowing your weaknesses, it is a gift from God. One of the blessings from God is that he doesn't show us all of our weaknesses all of a sudden, because we probably wouldn't be able to handle it. He takes us bit by bit, step by step, and shows us where our weaknesses are, and so that on our journey with him, we can grow with him. Okay. All right. So a little bit of psychology. Um, I use this to help us understand our personality. The reason I use it is because most evidence-based, the big five personality traits is one of the most evidence-based ways of looking at personality. The way they found out these five traits is by taking a bunch of, they went through the dictionary, they found a bunch of character traits, and they found which ones tended to correlate similarly with people. Okay? And they kept, and it was very mathematical how they did it. They looked at correlation, and they saw there was high correlation in certain things, and they said these, you can break down every single personality trait, or you can combine every single personality trait into these five. Okay? And it's not like we're one of these five. We are all somewhere on the scale for these five. The five personality traits are, and I have an example here. For example, if you're talkative, if you're outgoing, if you're energetic, if you're sociable, then they just put that all under extrovert. You're extrovert. I don't need to describe it a million different ways. It's all extrovert. And so there are five personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And we all lie somewhere on these five. So I might be high on openness, low on conscientiousness, high on extroversion, low on agreeableness, and high on neuroticism. Okay? None of these traits are inherently good or bad, but they can be exploited. And we'll talk about how they can be exploited by the devil, by the people around you. They can lead to your own self-destruction. And so keeping an eye out, understanding myself and what these traits mean, helps me understand where to set limits. One of my slides. So we'll start with the first one, open or openness to experience. This trait is about how open you are to trying something new, trying something different. People are very high on openness, people are very low on openness. You can see this in as kids as young as 2. Some kids, they see a toy that makes uh, weird sounds and music. They might be drawn to it. They're like, oh, what's that? Other kids will be like, oh, get that away from me. They might start crying, right? Even younger, you can see that in babies. Um, and so somebody who is high on openness is constantly seeking new experiences. They want to try new. They're okay with new cultures. They want to travel. They want to try new food all the time. They get bored easily, and they want to keep learning new things. They'll watch endless YouTube videos, whatever random topic they came across. Uh, they want to go to a different borough. They want to travel outside. They'll always be like, why? And again, they get bored easily. Somebody who's low on openness is more traditional. And so they prefer the routine and stability of, uh, of whatever they grew up learning, whatever they're more comfortable with. And they view these traditions and the routines as important. And they're very practical and they're very straightforward. So we'll start by using a biblical example about the prodigal son and his brother. Yeah, I think the prodigal son and his brother give the perfect example of somebody who's very, very high on openness and somebody who's very low on openness, and how both of those positions can cause issues. Again, inherently, there's nothing wrong with that, but they can cause problems. So you have the prodigal son who goes to his father and he says, Father, give me the portion of good that falls to me. And then the father divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, wasted his possessions with prodigal living. When he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and began to be in want. We all know the story of the prodigal son. He started looking for pigs. He was like at home at least. Prodigal son. Actually, let me rephrase it. Why did the prodigal son want to leave? The prodigal son. Maybe. I won't give you the mic if you don't want. I'll give it to you if you want. I don't know. He's very open, sure. Um, is he like? That's the correct answer. Is he lacking anything? So what is it? So open is. You're right. He's definitely. We could think of him as being very high on. What is his drive? What's motivating? He doesn't need food. Not poor. Nothing he's lacking. What is it? What? First, curiosity. And so people who are high on openness, the curiosity gets them. What is that? What is that? I want to see that. I want to try something new. I want to try something different. Why do I have to follow the rules? Let me try something new. And so his openness here, his desire to try something similar to Adam and Eve. What was the temptation of Eve? Is she lacking in fruit in the Garden of Eden? Did she need more fruit? Oh, what the serpent came to her? He said what? What did he say? Be like this. What? Knowledge of the knowledge of good and evil. You will become like God. You're gonna know things. You're gonna experience things that you haven't experienced before. And so for the people that are high in openness, that temptation of here, try something new, be very strong. I want to try something new every day. I want to see something new every day. So you have here the prodigal son who is high on openness. So that's the prodigal son. Now the older brother, when he came back, what did the older brother say? He said he was angry. They threw this big party for him. The older brother was standing outside. He was angry. He wouldn't go in. And his father came out and pleaded with him. His father, God, came out and begged him. And he said what? He said, Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment, and at any time, and yet you never even gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. And then he says, what about his younger brother? But as soon as the son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlot, who killed the fatted calf, the son of yours, who's wasted your money, harlot. You want to know what a harlot is? You know, because he who's devoured your money in sin, he took him back. The older son, high on openness or low on openness? Low. Low on openness. He never left. He never left the church. He never tried anything different. He stayed where he was supposed to do. He followed tradition to a T. He's like, I didn't even transgress a rule. But the issue with this level of close-mindedness is what? When his younger brother came, because he's so used to his way of doing it, because he's so used to tradition, the way that things are supposed to be, he looked at his younger brother and he judged. Okay? So this is the issue with people who are low on or high on. Be a little bit rigid. They're not open to new people. So let's move on to the next point, which is knowledge. The Bible talks about knowledge in a lot of different ways. We talk about the knowledge of good and evil and how that was harmful in the case of Adam and Eve. The Bible talks about knowledge in two ways. It says, in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. This is Ecclesiastes 1:18. This is Solomon. In Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from being a priest for me. Because you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. And then the next one. Behold, I send you out as a sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Brethren, do not be children understanding, however, in malice be babes, but in understanding be mature. I threw a lot of verses at you. The Bible says two things that seem to be opposite each other, but they're not. He who increases knowledge increases grief. And then it says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So it's clearly not about the knowledge in general. It's about the type of knowledge. The type of knowledge that you take. I'll give an example. It's okay to be aware of what's going on in the world. Be aware of atrocities and terrible things. Do you think it's healthy for you to know the details of evil? See the death of children in front of you, nonstop, day in and day out. It probably has an impact. That level of knowledge is not good. It's good to know that it's happening, but you do not need to know the details of evil. And he solves this. He says what? He says, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Don't be children in understanding. Don't be unaware of what's going on in the world. But in malice, when it comes to the details of evil, be like babies. Okay? Clear? Guys with me? All right. St. Paul is, we talked about an example of bad openness. St. Paul is an example of healthy openness. St. Paul says, what? The Jew I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak, I became as weak. He says to the Greeks, I became as a Greek. To the Romans, I became as a Roman. To the slaves, I became as a slave. To the freemen, I became as a freeman. Like I become all things to all men, so that like being like them, by being open to them, I might win some for who? For the glory of God. I might save some. And there's a really nice story that highlights this, being open to new people, new experiences, in order to just understand and be able to empathize to someone that might have had a different experience from. You guys see that picture? sculpture? Does anyone know what's the story of that sculpture? I'll tell you what it says on the sculpture. It says to the unknown God. St. Paul went to Greek city, Athens, and he saw the sculpture built to the unknown God. St. Paul, we know this, any city that he walked into, he preached. So he sees the sculpture to the unknown God, and his mind is open enough to understand where these people are coming from so that he could approach them. He says what? He says, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with the inscription, to the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you." He's like, you guys worship idols, but I at least saw a statue to the unknown God. This unknown God that you worship without knowing, this is the one I come to preach. Right? He didn't walk in and start preaching fire and brimstone. You're worshiping stone and dust, you're going to hell. No, he met people where they were. So this is the healthy level of openness, the ability to empathize and understand someone who's in a situation that's different. All right, we talked about healthy. Move on to the next one. There's 5 of them. This is number 2. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is the tendency to be responsible, organized, hardworking, goal-directed, and to adhere to rules. So this is someone who has a color-coded notebook, whose books are organized in alphabetical order, who needs to have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. That is how they live their life. There's nothing wrong with that. That's someone who's high on conscience. Somebody who is low on conscience, the organization, they can take it or leave it. They don't have that. They're just a little bit more flexible, a little bit more sort of go with the flow. They're spontaneous. They might come up with an idea on the spot and decide that they're going to go ahead with it. Right. Another sibling duo, Mary and Martha. I won't bore you. But you guys know the story of Mary and Martha? What's the story of Mary and Martha? You want to summarize it for me? Okay, I won't bore you about the Bible. You want to summarize Mary and Martha for me? I'll give you the mic. You guys don't know the story of Mary and Martha? That's crazy. That's wild. Uh, but anyways, the story is in the Bible, the book that we read every day. It's in the Gospel of St. Luke. So Christ visits Mary and Martha, who are both sisters, and he comes in to visit them, and he's supposed to spend time with them. Martha's, and it says, the Bible says, Martha was distracted with much serving. She got up the minute Christ entered the house, started cleaning and organizing and figuring out food. And so she's trying to serve God. That is her goal. And she comes up to Christ and she complains and she says, what? Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. I'm up here. I'm working in the kitchen. I'm cleaning. And she's doing nothing. She's doing nothing. She's sitting there and just spending time with her. Then Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. Who's more rule-focused, organized in this story? Mary or Martha? Who is less conscientious? Less conscientious. Mary. The issue with someone who's overly conscientious, and Pope Shenouda talks about this a lot, someone who's very, very focused on what they need to do, the task, the responsibility, is that they lose the relationship. They lose the person. Service takes priority over prayer. Making money takes priority over spending time with their family. Whatever responsibility takes priority over the person that's sitting in front of them. and is experiencing whatever they're experiencing. Martha has Christ in her home, and the responsibilities, they're like the thorns that sort of choked her, and she couldn't focus on what was important. Mary, on the other hand, in this particular case, her lack of conscientiousness worked to her benefit. She was able to sit and enjoy the relationship. So the trick here, if you are highly conscientious, is to make sure that you don't lose the people. You know those people who you go on vacation with and they have like a million plans and you just want to sleep, but they drag you through the market and the historical site and whatever. And they don't see that you are trailing behind them. There's a hole in your shoe, you're tired, you're sweaty, you're thirsty, right? Sometimes you can lose the people in the um, the 10 virgins, the 5 wise and the 5 foolish. So this is the opposite. You cannot live your life as a Christian without having some form of canon or rule that you follow. There has to be conscience. What were the 5 foolish virgins missing in the story? 10 foolish virgins are preparing for the wedding. 5 of them have oil and they're prepared. They're prepared for the wedding, and the other 5, they're like, you know what? Bridegroom's not coming yet. I don't got to worry about it. Black, be fine. And then all of a sudden, the bridegroom comes knocking, or they hear the sound of the bridegroom. They all go. The 5 who are ready go with him, and the 5 who don't have are now in a panic. I don't have oil. Go find oil. By the time they come back, the doors are shut. And so their lack of preparedness, a lack of preparedness in your spiritual life can be detrimental. The whole point of that story is that a lack of faithfulness, a lack of regularity, a lack of effort that's placed in on a regular basis, sort of laid back approach might not work for you, especially when it comes to your spiritual and eternal life. Luke 11:42, Christ says, "Woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs and pass by justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone." The tasks matter, but so do the people. These people are tithing mint. Imagine giving 10% of your mint, but they don't care about the widows. They, they, um, they sue people for their land. They do all of these things. He's like, you're tithing mint and rue, and you're not taking care of love and justice and the rights of widows in your community. You're not serving the people around. And he says what? He's not saying you shouldn't care about the details. He's saying, what does he say? These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. You can't lose the person. Can't lose the person in the service. At the same time, you also can't abandon your personality. Dimension number 3, extroversion. We already talked about this. Extroverted people are talkative, they're outgoing, they're energetic, they're social. When they interact with people, they feel like they have more energy than if they didn't interact. Introverted people are the opposite. They hate loud noises, they hate crowded rooms. They don't even, fun fact, they don't even like spicy food as much. Extroverted people like spicy food more. Usually it's correlated. And so an extroverted person needs people. Day 3 of COVID lockdown, they're having a mental breakdown. I can't do this. As opposed to someone who's a little bit more reserved and introverted, 30 days in, they're having the time of their life. They're reading books. They'll call 1 or 2 friends. Everybody needs social interaction. They'll call 1 or 2 friends, and that's their social interaction for the month. Extroverted people tend to be a little bit louder when they speak. Introverted people tend to be a little bit quieter, more reserved, more careful with what they say. So the issue with high extroversion is great. There are plenty of biblical characters that were extroverted, but the issue, this is how it can be twisted against popularity. When the opinion of people, because your whole life depends on it, matters more to you than the opinion of God, that's the trap. That's the trap. When the opinion of the people around you matter more than the opinion of God, that becomes a trap. On top of that, because you're extroverted, because you're so social, you're letting everything in, you can let habits in your life that might not be good. And the Bible is very clear about this. Do not be deceived. You know this verse. Well, know this verse, I hope. Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Proverbs 15:33. You're extroverted, you're having fun, you're interacting with everyone. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But what are you letting into your day to day life? What habits are these people bringing in? So that's the issue with extroversion. The issue with introversion, or what you have to be careful with introversion, is people stress me out is not an excuse to not serve them. People stress me out too. Stress everyone. But your job is to serve these people. In Matthew 25, Christ talks about this. When he separates the righteous from the wicked, he says at the right hand, left hand, he says to the people on the left hand, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick, and in prison, and you did not visit me." And they're going to say to him, "Lord, when were you sick? Naked? We didn't visit you or feed you or clothe you." And he's going to say, "Inasmuch as you do to the least of these people, you've done to them." Service is the requirement of every Christian. It doesn't mean that if you hate public speaking, you have to do public speaking. It doesn't mean if you dislike large crowds that you have to be in large crowds. But you do have to serve the community around you. Even the monks in the desert, all they're doing is praying. They are praying for the world around them. Part of their prayer is dedicated to the world around them. That was our extroversion. Okay. Fourth, agreeableness. Okay, what do you guys think agreeableness is? Please don't say being agreeable. Going with the flow. Very good. An agreeable person is someone who is cooperative, so polite, kind, friendly, they're likable. They go with the flow, they have no issue with anything, nothing's a big deal. A person who's low on agreeableness doesn't care to go with the flow. They know what they like, they know what they want, they're going to do what they like and want. They don't care about being polite or kind or friendly. Again, nothing right or wrong with either of those things. It can be a rude person. Not that any of you are, I'm sure. But in and of itself, being someone who's prone to just kind of go with the flow, you don't really care as much, whatever. Opposed to somebody who is, no, I know what I want what I want, get what I want. There's inherently nothing wrong with it. I'm going to share a story here. You'll notice that I use siblings or pairs, because one of the interesting things about these traits that sometimes the opposite of it brings it out or corrects it. And so here, this is a story of St. Paul and St. Peter. During the time of St. Paul, for some context, during the time of St. Paul, one of the biggest heresies during his time was that some people wanted to live basically the Old Testament law, sacrifices, the clean, unclean, the pure, impure type of life while being Christian. This was a huge controversy. And the apostles, including St. Peter at the time, agreed that this was not Christ's message. Us obsessing over animals with 4 feet versus animals with 2 feet was not Christ's message, and that Christ came to complete them. So this is the context. St. Paul, primarily responsible for the Gentiles or the Jews? Paul, primarily an apostle for the Gentiles or the Jews? Gentiles. Thank you very much. He wrote 13 letters, all dedicated to Gentile cities. Romans, Colossians. I guess he wrote Hebrews dedicated to Jews, but that's the exception, not the rule. He wrote another 12 letters dedicated to people outside of Israel and the Jewish tribes. St. Peter, primarily an apostle to the Gentiles or the Jews? St. Peter, primarily an apostle of the Jews. So this incident happens in which St. Paul and St. Peter are obviously friends. St. Peter is having a meal with some of the Jews, especially some of the Jews that had this mindset of, oh, the Old Testament, the circumcision, etc., etc. And so, as St. Peter is sitting and he's having these meal with Hebrews, a bunch of non-Jewish Christians walk in, Gentile Christians walk in. And St. Peter, because he didn't want to cause trouble or an issue, he didn't want to be confrontational, he wanted things to go smoothly. He got up, he didn't sit with the Gentiles, just very quietly, wouldn't sit with the Gentile Christians and sat with the Jews. Why? Because for the Jews, sitting with Gentiles, you're spending time with unclean people. Okay? And Peter didn't say anything, but he's like, you know what? Just kind of go with the flow, just let it ride, who cares, move on. Okay? And then St. Paul arrives and sees this scene, or he was there. He says, when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face because he was to be blamed. For before certain men came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. And the rest of the Jews also played, the Jewish Christians who understood that this is wrong, also played the hypocrite with him. So that even Barnabas who is St. Paul's mentor, even Barnabas was carried away with their hypocrisy. But when I saw that they were not straightforward about the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter before them all, if you, being a Jew, live in the matter of Gentiles and not as Jews, why to compel Gentiles to live as Jews? So Paul sees this. And St. Paul, we already talked about this, a little bit more open, a little bit more aware of the situation around him. He sees this happen, and he sees the impact on Gentile Christians. And he says what? He goes up to St. Peter and he says, in front of everyone, confrontation in front of everyone, he says, if you are a Jew, you live your life as a Gentile. I don't know what's going on, but you're pretending to be this circumcisional Jew, but you live your life as a Gentile. And he confronted him then and there. You know what I'm going to ask? Who's the agreeable one in this? You're simple. Amazing. Who is the disagreeable one in this scenario? You're St. Paul. St. Paul. Thank you. So the issue with agreeableness, the issue with being someone who's go with the flow, is that peer pressure is easy for you to fall into. Nobody wants to admit it's easy for them to fall into peer pressure. It is easier for some people than it is for others. So you have to be careful. You just sort of keeping an eye out for things that you might never actually do if you were by yourself. But because the crowd is doing it, and because you just want things to move smoothly, you don't like confrontation, you just kind of go with it. You have to be careful with that. Because this is one of the traps, one of the known traps of the devil. We warn people as young as kindergarten about pick your friends wisely, peer pressure, all that. There is a reason for it. There is a reason for it. And while it may seem that the Christian way is to always put a smile on your face, not be confrontational, in this case, St. Paul had to. He was doing it out of love. He had to cause it, right? Because he was protecting people that were new to the faith. He was doing his job as an apostle by protecting. Do you think, also to put more things, do you think St. Peter got upset? Well, I'm never talking to you again. No. We know they stayed friends until the end. They got martyred around the same time. They were together until the very end. So this is the danger of agreeableness. The danger of disagreeableness, honestly, it's just kind of hard to deal with someone that argues with you over everything. If you're kind of rough around the edges, it was said of Christ. It was said of Christ that a dying flame, when you walk, he wouldn't. his voice, even though he preached to thousands of people, people didn't hear his voice. He was polite, courteous, and when he was even talking to the Samaritan woman, when the Bible uses the, the label woman as if we interpret that differently. Back then, a woman was the equivalent of man. A woman whose history he knows. He chose to treat her with respect. Okay. All right, the last one. Neuroticism. First of all, have any of you heard the term neurotic before? Can't with me? I'll give you the. Neuroticism is just the proneness to experience unpleasant. Okay? People who are high in neuroticism, their whole thing is avoiding negative emotions because they're so sensitive to them, and avoiding inducing them in others. So they worry about distress and fear and pain in themselves or in others, and they're preoccupied with avoiding these experiences. So a lot of these people, at times, they don't have to, but they might be prone to anxiety and depression because these things impact them a little bit. They hit them a little bit harder. And they might someone who's a little bit low on neuroticism. Someone who's low on neuroticism is like, I wish I was low on neuroticism. Someone who just doesn't feel anything. Living life, they're just not as reactive. Things go, whatever, I don't care. You got a flat tire, I'll be fine. You're late 30 minutes, whatever. You broke your arm, we'll go to the hospital. Like, they just don't care. They don't care to, they're offended, they don't care to offend others. And so really it becomes about fear. What's the positive? What do you guys think is the positive for someone who's high on benefit? If you have it. Like, how can this be used for good? Yes. Avoid hurting others. So these people tend to be very empathetic. Right? And so they're more careful. I don't want to say the wrong thing. But they're also more aware of where things could go wrong. They're more careful. They're more cautious. They don't take unnecessary risks because they're worried about the consequences. So there is a benefit. You want your brain surgeon to be a little bit neurotic. You don't want them to be like, oh, whatever, we'll figure this out. You want them to have just a tad bit of concern and when they're doing the operation, so that they're not just completely detached, not taking. All right, and so this brings us into our conversation on fear. And Christ kind of solves this whole issue with anxiety and fear and when to use it. Right? Uh, he talks about the sparrows of the air and the flowers of the field. And he tells you, he's like, don't worry. He's like, why are you worried about the needs of your flesh when I take care of all of the things around you? The little things I take care of. Where is this anxiety coming from? There are over 200 verses that are saying, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. Why? Because the anxiety, the distress, the excessive fear, with time can lead to despair, lead to hope. Every mistake, you just feel the heaviness of it, the guilt, and you just can't get over. And with time, that can lead to despair. If and then the opposite, someone who's low on neuroticism, who doesn't really feel the anxiety as much, someone who is not worried or not concerned. This is the only person who Christ says to fear. He says, I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that have no more that they can do. Don't be worried about people that can even hurt you or kill you. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after he has killed, has the power to cast into hell. Yes, I say to you, fear him. You're worried about the little things. I'm telling you, don't worry about the little things. I tell you what you should fear. You should be scared of if you're not worried about it. You should be preoccupied with if you're not preoccupied with already, which is your eternal. This whole thing on watchfulness, I won't read it, but the idea that you should live a life in which you are aware of your weakness. You are aware. You are a person who just likes new things, gets bored easy. You should be aware that you are more prone to bigger mistakes, the bigger sinful temptation and lust, because you constantly want to experience something new. And that should be something that you are aware of. And what might be okay for someone to try might not be okay for you to try. You're high on open. And we'll go through the fixes. If you like to try new things, your whole thing is something new, something new, something new, you have to put guardrails on it. You have to be harsher on yourself than other people would be. Some people might be okay with Instagram and they can scroll it and it won't take up time for your day. But for you, because you get bored so easily, watching a 20-second video is a lot more entertaining than doing your homework. Instagram might not be good for you. TikTok might not be good for you. You might have to put like something that limits the amount of screen time that you're on. You might have to delete the app if you have to. That might be the way that the devil enters your life. That might be the way that the devil distracts you. You're a lot easily distracted. So that's something you have to be aware of. And so the guardrails are important. The guardrails are important. I won't go on this website because maybe people use it for information, but for me, I can go down the rabbit hole. It can lead to something else. I don't want to. Okay? If you're closed to new experience, and your whole thing's about tradition and etiquette and all of that, what you have to be careful of is judgment. When you see something different, your mind might go to judgment. Somebody new comes and they might not be dressed the most appropriately to church. The first time comes. Okay? Your obsession with tradition and etiquette might lead you to snap at that person. When in reality, that is their first time. And eventually they'll dress appropriately and like we all do. But it's their first time, and you have to keep an open mind and understand the context in which things are happening. Just like St. Paul. St. Paul wasn't preaching an idol to these people. But he said, this unknown God that you worship but don't know, this is the one. He went in a way that would be acceptable. Right? He said to the Greek, I've become like a Greek. When you look at his writing style is consistent. But based on who he's talking to, he changes the way he talks a little bit, just a little bit, so that he can relate to them. Okay? And so the danger of someone with low and openness is the judgment. And so you have to remember that Christ, just like he died for you, he died for the person that lives in Alaska, and the person that lives in Hong Kong, and the person that has lived a life of adultery, and the person that's lived as a nun or a monk. He's died for everyone, and your judgment does not bring them close. Okay? Conscientiousness. You like rules, you like responsibility, you like to have a journal. That's wonderful. That's great. That will help you so much. It will help you become more and more successful in your life. But be careful for these rules not to become like the thorn, sort of choke and impair your growth, where you're so obsessed with the schedule that you forget that there are people with you. Right? That you are like Martha, serving, and what's the time that you spend with Christ? It's non-existent. If you're not detail-oriented, push yourself to try and follow the rules. If you have to, the church has a built-in mechanism to externalize responsibility. You have your spiritual father. That's a person that can hold you responsible to the rules. If you yourself by nature you get distracted easy, you don't pay attention, you're not really a rule follower. If you're highly extroverted, be careful of the people that you spend time with. It's good that you can talk to anyone. It's great that you can talk to inanimate objects. That is wonderful. But be careful of the type of people that you spend an excessive amount of time. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but because their habits we know can influence. You are an average of your five closest friends. You want to know, you want to know, this gets so specific that your five closest friends, if you want to know how much money you're going to make, look at your five closest friends. I'll give you an idea. You're somewhere probably in the air. Probably going to be around this, right? So what you let in matters. If you're introverted, you shouldn't neglect service. You should serve if you have to serve one on one. You can't tolerate big groups, that's fine. You weren't created that way, that's totally fine. But at the very least, find the people that you can serve one on one. Find the services that maybe you don't have to interact with people. That's okay. Work within whatever personality that God has given you. If you're agreeable, you need to practice to say no. It's going to be uncomfortable the first time that you do it. You have to do it. St. Paul had to. Inability to say no is a one-way ticket. Is a one-way ticket to destruction. Because there will be pressure. And the pressures increase, they don't decrease. You might be uncomfortable saying no. You might be uncomfortable having a conversation which the other person is not happy to talk to. But at some point, you have to say no, even if it goes against your nature. Because the devil sees your inability to say no, and he will bring you the temptation where, but I don't want to cause a fuss. I just got this promotion, but oh, I don't want them to like me. You have to say no. Okay? If you're disagreeable, you need to practice politeness. And this is the verse that I was referencing earlier. He didn't quarrel nor cry out, nor anyone would hear his voice in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoking flax he won't quench. The lightest of flame. He was polite and gentle enough to not cause havoc and destruction, antagonistic and loud and rude and offensive. Right? The fact that you're able to say no so easily is a gift, a blessing. You just need to know to tailor it. Saying no is not just to say no to make your life easier, to be antagonistic. There are some people that love confrontation, don't get it, but they enjoy it. So be careful with that. Be careful with that. Because you can turn off people, turn them away. All right. Finally, neuroticism. You have to be careful from excessive anxiety. Remembering that worrying will not add a cubit to your strategy. Obsessing over every little thing. You repented, you confessed. You're going back a month later, 2 months, 3 months, the same sin, 4 months later. It's not like you're doing it again. It's the same sin that you did 6 months ago. And you just can't believe that God forgave you because the anxiety, the obsession that's in you won't let you. Okay? You have to remember that when God says, if your sins are as red as crimson, I will make them as white as snow. Just come to me, repent. Repent, change your life, and I promise I'll forgive you. You have to. This is when your faith plays in. Even if you don't feel like you're forgiven. You did the steps that you had to do. You repent. The turning of the heart. You change your life. Better you can't keep going back and replaying this anxiety of whatever sin you committed. It will lead to despair. You have to be careful. And the final thing is, if you don't feel it, great, wonderful. I'm glad that you're living an anxiety-free life, but you should have at least one fear. You should understand that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and that the fear that you have for your eternal life is necessary. You need to have a little bit of healthy concern. Like, you know what? Better than other people. I hate that. Somebody came up to me and says, you know what? God grades people on a curve. Like, where'd you get that from? He said, well, I'm better than 80% of the population. Like, where'd you get that from? There is no basis for all of these excuses that we tell ourselves of like, well, I'm better than so. Okay, and you might be. And when his disciples came to him and they asked him, will there be many that will inherit eternal life? He said, what? Strive to enter through the narrow gate. His response wasn't, there will be many or there won't be many. He said, it's going to be hard. Hard, and you have to do it. If you do the work, you'll be fine. Okay? So much for having me. Any questions?
thank Mark very much for giving us this amazing talk. Like he said, really good in Colonia, so we had to have him come give us the same talk on a Tuesday night for you guys. So that wraps up the second week. Like we said, we'll do 2 weeks of lecture followed by 2 weeks of workshop. So starting next week at 8 o'clock, we'll be here, but we will split up into two different workshop groups. We will split them up, boys and girls, and then we will have discussion based off the last 2 weeks that we've heard. So now we heard from Mark today. What did we hear from? What did we hear about last week? Who remembers? You're gonna have to remember for your workshop. You're gonna have to come, take in what you hear. Give you a hint. It was Ebeno spoke about obedience. Very good. Okay. So I'll put all the announcements up on the screen. A couple very important ones, especially the ones we made separate groups for the workshops. They're all in the community and the WhatsApp group. So if you see them, you can join them, and I'll put the link on the screen too. But first, attendance. Not working? Philly. Okay, for the Philly competition, August 16th, 15th, these are the books. Some people already got your books. Um, so we'll come up with some day that we can sit down and put together some questions to prepare. But if you signed up, please let us know because we don't see the sign up. So please come to us, let us know that you signed up so we can be ready to go to Philly that day. It'll start with liturgy in the morning, so we'll meet here. I think last year we met at around 6:30 maybe. Then we went to Philly. It was a nice fun day. They feed you breakfast, have the competition, and we go to unlimited sushi after. Okay? So the better we do, good. We get out first, we go to sushi. So it's a win-win. But these are the books. I'm not sure how many we have left of Against New Heresies or The Voice of the Beloved, but I know we have 2 copies of The Silent Patriarch. For anyone, there's more on the way. So if anyone wants a book on Silent Patriarch tonight, I have one here, and this form, super important. So please pay attention. Everyone get your phones out because everyone has to scan this QR code. Even if you scanned it in the beginning of the meeting, we made a couple updates, but everyone please scan this QR code. This is how we're gonna take feedback from what you guys have and from what you guys want to learn throughout the meeting. So that includes the 2 lectures that we're gonna hear every month, and the 2 workshop groups. Okay? There's a few topics that are listed in this form already that we kind of have an idea that maybe you guys might want to hear, but there's other options that you guys can fill out, whatever you guys have in mind that you want to hear in case we missed it on the form. So please fill it out. It's anonymous, so we don't see who fills it out. So you can really answer it to in detail however you like. But this is how we're going to take what you guys have in your minds, what you guys want to learn, whatever experience you guys have. This is how we know. Okay, so we'll ask the workshops based. We'll ask the speakers to come discuss topics based off what you guys fill out. Okay, whether it's coming, the last time coming, which I hope it's not, but please fill this out. It's very, very important. Okay, because we do at the end of the day, we want this meeting to be as beneficial and relatable as possible. Okay, so this is our way of putting it in your hands because at the end of the day, this is your meeting. So you guys fill out the information you guys want to hear. That will be provided, God willing. Okay? Give you guys a few minutes to fill out the form. I know it's a little bit long, but please fill it out. I'll send a link to the group, the main group as well. Please, if you're a guy, don't scan the girls one, and if you're a girl, don't scan the boys one. In these groups will probably put the points that we discussed in the workshops. It'll be a nice way that we can communicate with our groups throughout the weeks. Even the weeks where we have a lecture in the church together, we can always turn back to these groups and talk about whatever we heard, questions, feedback, any takeaways that we can all implement. Okay? Please join the groups. Next week, what time we're coming? Very good. No one's coming next week. What time we're coming next week? You guys are dead. 8 o'clock. Please come early so that when we do start the workshops, you don't walk in at 9 o'clock and you miss the whole workshop. Okay? And that's it for QR codes, but there's a few more announcements. So just bear with. Last three things. Tomorrow night, there's a group that's going to come and clean the library at 6:30 if anyone wants to help. The library does need some cleaning, so thank you to those who are going to volunteer to do it. If anyone else wants to help tomorrow night at 6:30, the library upstairs, people will be cleaning. The midnight run happening Monday night at 7:30. So we need help preparing sandwiches, which will happen tomorrow. Sunday night, the day before at 6 o'clock. Sunday night, 6 o'clock. If you're unable to go Monday night, that's a nice opportunity to be able to serve and help prepare the sandwiches. Vice versa. If you can attend both, that's great. Monday night, the group will leave church at 7:30 to go do the midnight run. Okay? Anything else? You good? You good? Okay. Like I said, please, please, please fill out this form honestly, so we generally get feedback from what you guys want. Okay? Let's stand up to pray, and we'll go downstairs. There's pizza and sandwiches. Fill out all the questions. So we're already looking at your feedback. So someone put Andy as a topic. As I know how much we love Andy, but he's not a topic. Okay? At least for Tuesday night meeting. Name the Father, Son, God, for the speaker today. God, for giving us grace for food and water we drink every day. Please, God, heal the sick and forgive us our
Thank you, God, for allowing us to hear your word. Help us to stay safe. Help those that need
you have a microphone, please give it to me.